Is there a greater testament to the beauty and attainability of the American dream than Daniel Plainview in There Will Be Blood? A more aspirational story than that of this determined, hard-working man who pulls himself up by his bootstraps and climbs from the bottom rung of the ladder, quite literally, all the way to the luxury of a fulfilled, wealthy old age. Wait, scratch that. Paul Thomas Anderson's twisted masterpiece is epic in its scope, casting a wide net in a complex period of American history and exploring themes of capitalist greed, religion, and madness. This maelstrom of ideas whirls around the central figure of Daniel Plainview, constantly tugging his focus in increasingly revealing directions. But while the messaging about capitalism and religious symbolism are fascinating to unravel in a more academic sense, they are supplementary to the main drive of the film. It would have been all too easy for Paul Thomas Anderson to portray Plainview as a heartless demon, with nothing but greed and money on his mind, and some critics do seem to read him in that way. But to do so is to turn a blind eye to the tragically emotional performance of Daniel Day-Lewis as Plainview and the central dramatic question that drives him. There Will Be Blood is not a cold essay on the perils of capitalism. In watching it, we engage emotionally in the battle for Plainview's soul. In his book Into the Woods, John Yorke writes that great characters are consciously or subconsciously at war with themselves. This war is driven by a contradiction between what the character consciously desires, which is often the stated goal of the film, and what they unknowingly really need to complete themselves and become an emotionally fulfilled person. In a typical movie, the protagonist usually completes their conscious desire during the second half of the film, only to find themselves realising what they've really needed all along. But There Will Be Blood is not a typical movie. It's a tragedy. Daniel Plainview is a man who knows himself. He knows what he wants and what he needs, and has done since he was a young man. At one point, in a moment of vulnerability, he divulges his dream in full.
There's that house in Fond du Lac that John Hollister built. Do you remember it? I thought as a boy that was the most beautiful house I'd ever seen. I wanted it. I wanted to live in it. And even as a boy, I wanted to have children to run around in it.
The house and wealth will ultimately prove superficial, but the key here is that Daniel consciously wants the exact thing that he needs. This is a man who desperately wants to be part of a loving family unit, a man who loves children and goes out of his way to take care of them, even when they aren't his. But throughout the tragic events of the film, we see how the makeup of his psyche, his greed and his ironclad facade of masculinity prevent him from nurturing that loving environment that he desperately needs. One of these tragic events occurs halfway through the film, a crucial turning point in screenplay structure. John Yorke writes that the midpoint of each film is the moment when each protagonist embraces for the first time the quality they will need to become complete and finish their story. It's when they discover a truth about themselves. In a dark story like this rule is often inverted. The protagonists fail to reconcile the missing part of themselves and set themselves on a path of destruction. This occurs when Daniel, unable to cope with his son HW's loss of hearing, sends his one shot at a family away to a children's home. This permanently breaks their relationship and leads to a period of depressed introspection, as well as humiliation in the community at the hands of Eli. His failure as a father in this moment is something that neither he nor HW will ever recover from. So Daniel Plainview's story is a tragic failure to give love effectively and receive it in turn. But where does his failure stem from? It's clear that part of the problem comes from his tendency to put too much time into his work and too much focus on his capitalistic greed. But his emotional problems must stem from somewhere deeper than that. We are told very little of Daniel's past and childhood, but one thing ostensibly missing from his story is any interest in women.
Mr. Plainview, a question, sir. Where is your wife?
One explanation for this is given by a cut line from the script. in which Daniel tells Henry the truth about HW and reveals that he is impotent. While this would explain a lot about Daniel, the fact that Paul Thomas Anderson didn't include it in the film tells us that he wanted to leave it open for different interpretations. Could Daniel's nature be a result of a lifetime spent repressing his true sexuality in a hyper-masculine environment? A true nature, whether bisexual, homosexual, asexual, that would see him ostracised from society, perhaps even killed? We could certainly read a lot from the fact that he is almost never seen without a close male companion by his side, even into his old age.
This is my closest associate. He hears everything.
I'll work with Mr. Plainview.
And his over-exaggerated performance of masculinity could be read as something of an overcompensation, a solid wall that he has built between his true self and the outside world, especially as it becomes almost farcical in later scenes. The mysteries of Daniel's past are left wide open, and that mystery makes him all the more intriguing as we attempt to decipher his self-destructive actions.
Why did you leave? I know you didn't get on with that father.
I don't like to explain myself.
Viewing the film with this reading in mind adds additional significance to other areas of the narrative. His inherent distaste for religion and the people who tried to force it on him could be based, at least partially, on the church's stance on non-heteronormative lifestyles. But it also stems from Eli and his followers' ability to see what Daniel is missing in his life. Eli knows that Daniel needs a loving family, and uses this knowledge to disarm him and try to recruit him.
You should be washed in the blood of Jesus Christ.
The church offers another form of family in the congregation and the comfort of faith. But in Daniel's eyes, the cost of joining this family is more than just the money and status that Eli would take from him. The true cost of joining the faith would be his own internal integrity. Daniel sees the falsity of Eli's egotistical leadership practices and the manipulative nature of the church at large.
It was one goddamn hell of a show.
Daniel and Eli don't become enemies because of their differences, but because of their similarities, and the ability this gives them to see each other's true nature clearer than anyone else ever has. They're both competing for the money and faith of those they take advantage of. This renders Eli's attempt to recruit him as nothing more than insulting to Daniel. This is especially true later in the film, when Eli really sinks his claws into Daniel's weakness.
I was lost, but now I'm found.
I have abandoned my child.
I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my child! I've abandoned my boy!
Daniel gets his revenge in the end, of course, but he never really recovers from the shame of having his greatest failure, his failure to become a father to HW, screamed out to the congregation of Eli's church, and worse yet, the shame of being seen to acquiesce to Eli's leadership. His final victory is rendered hollow by his ultimate failure in his relationship with his son. He may have won the battle with Eli, but he has lost the war for his own soul. It is in this time of ultimate darkness and misery that Daniel finally admits defeat and allows the film to end.
I'm finished.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for a new video essay every 2 weeks.